Hello and welcome to Riverland Women, the podcast which celebrates the amazing achievements and inspiring stories of women across South Australia's Riverland. I'm your host, Kerry Lush from the podcast station. Join me each fortnight as we meet some of the extraordinary women who call this region home. This is Riverland Women. In this episode, we meet Elspeth Radford. Elspeth was the founder of well-known South Australian country clothing label Saltbush. She has also had a distinguished nursing career and even had a cameo role in the iconic movie Breaker Morant, when she played the wife of Bryan Brown's character. Now she's dedicated to encouraging more rural doctors to train and serve in regional South Australia through her role at the Flinders Medical School, while she also runs an Airbnb at Wigley flat. Elspeth moved to the Riverland almost 15 years ago, after spending most of her life living on pastoral properties in South Australia, beginning with a childhood spent on her family station near Yunta. We start our conversation with her sharing some of those early memories of life on the land.
We all thought it was pretty normal, but it was probably, looking back, it was a children's paradise. We had a very large back paddock. We did school of the year and correspondence school until boarding school because there were no local schools. And probably, my first taste of going into a classroom was when I hit boarding school at the age of about 10, and also going to church because there wasn't a church nearby. It was fun. And following school, I decided to go nursing, and those were the days when you trained in a hospital. So again, sort of a long way from home. But that, I suppose, eventually took me back to the country. I did, after my graduation, I did some country work or some city work, and then went back to the country and did a bit of relief work in hospitals, and then sort of met my husband, also from the country, and then we moved to his family property out of Borough, and I was able to sort of continue, as well as working on the property, continue nursing as well.
How big a shock to the system was it going from growing up on a station, doing school by correspondence? I guess was it the HF radio back then, or was it all sort of writing and sending work away?
You'd have some radio. There was usually about an hour of radio a day, and then that would click in and out. So if we had 32 volt power, so if the power wasn't charging the battery for the radio didn't work. So you'd have to do a quick sprint up to the top of the hill and turn on the wind light so that worked.
Going from doing that to packing up all your belongings and heading to school in Adelaide.
Yeah. I suppose, being the youngest of four, I kind of knew what was going to happen, and I suppose my siblings had all gone. So I was a bit lonely, and I thought this was going to be a great new adventure, which it was. It was a bit of a shock to the system. I mean, my parents probably paid a fortune for me to live on a veranda surrounded with louvers, which no parent would put up with these days. But it was good, and those friendships you sort of make back then are those you keep ongoing, which is lovely. So school exposed me to sport. We were pretty uncoordinated kids out on the station, I suppose. You could ride a horse or a motorbike, but throwing and catching a ball was probably a whole new challenge. So I learnt lots of new skills in sports, but it was a great experience.
Being a station kid, you were probably pretty resourceful and independent anyway, but do you think that going away to boarding school from the age of 10 helped you in that respect as well?
I think, yes, certainly it does. I tell people when we went away at 10 that they're a bit shocked. But when you sort of know that's going to happen, and yes, it does teach you how to be independent and resourceful, and I suppose those are traits, in particularly for women, having those strengths going further on in your life are really useful.
So you met your husband while you were nursing, you moved to his family property. Tell us a bit about life there, and then children and what you did.
So we were similar to where I grew up. We were 30 miles from the nearest town, so I was able to go in and work in nursing at the local hospital as well, but it was sort of 70s, 80s, things were a bit tough. We used to muster goats for pocket money. I managed to I got my own class license, so I classed our wool. I was the shearer's cook, as you always are. And I remember one time when we were shearing, one chap had badly cut his hand, and I sort of stitched it up at the kitchen table. And you kind of just did that sort of thing.
Well, lucky you had your nursing background too.
Exactly. It was useful. And no, it was great. It was a very different property from the one I'd grown up on, but I really loved it.
What did you run there?
We had merino sheep.
And what were the years like when you were there? You said about mustering goats.
Yeah, it was tough. We had a beautiful garden that was my mother-in-law's garden initially, and I replanted that twice after drought. It was a bit soul-destroying. And then later we bought a property closer to Burra when we had 2 boys, and when it was time for school for them, it kind of coincided really well because I didn't want to have to teach my own children. I don't think that's fair to the child or the mother, actually. It's just not good for the relationship at all. So that worked really well. And then they went on to boarding school, but they went in about year 8.
So you're closer into town. Were you able to then work nursing more then?
Yeah, I did. I was nursing, but at the same time, I'd always sewn the children's clothes. So we established Saltbush Clothing, which was initially a little mail order children's clothing business. I'd sort of cut out at night, and my seamstress would come in during the day and sew, and then we sold on mail order, and then opened a little shop, and then moved that into adults clothing as well. It's sort of very late 80s, and it was kind of opportune, I suppose, because that was when the floor price scheme for wool crashed. And I think, the next goodness knows how many years, I think those of us who were specialist wool producers had a bit of a negative income. So that was, that was good.
How did that all start? Were you making clothes for yourself and your children at that time?
I sewed for the children, and I'd always sewn. That was one of the subjects we learned at school was dressmaking. And as a boarder, that was a kind of useful subject to learn because we could make our own clothes. So I'd always had sort of those skills, yeah.
And was it, born out of necessity of trying to make it an extra source of income, or was it that you couldn't find clothing for your sons at that time?
I couldn't find the clothing I wanted for the boys. I just wanted some moleskins and little check shirts and couldn't find them. So, as country women are, they're pretty resourceful. So we made them. And I didn't really know what a Pandora's box I'd opened. And it, kind of self-propelled a bit. It wasn't from any direction that we started that business. There was really no one else doing it at the time, and it was great. It was a great learning experience. We were fortunate enough we received a Telstra Small Business Award way back in the 90s, and that sort of gave me the opportunity, I suppose, that exposed us and the business a bit and gave me the opportunity to be involved on some boards, which again was a great learning experience. There were South Australian Government Wool Board and a couple of federal boards.
How did it start? You said you were cutting out and you had a seamstress come in and sew it all, but the brand was quite big from what I can remember back in the day. You wouldn't have been able to do all that yourself.
No. It grew. So from our back veranda, we then had a shop and we had sewing there, and then we outgrew that, and some of our seamstresses left for various reasons. One to have a baby, I think, and another sort of went back bush again. So we then sourced factories in Adelaide to do our work. But again, this is sort of late 80s, early 90s. And the import tariffs on imported clothing were slashed. And so there was so much competition for cheaper clothing in the market. And as a result, lots of the factories who made our garments shut. And so then we had to source offshore. Our brand grew. We were wholesaling nationally. And then we sort of ended up, we were supplying probably nearly 100 stores nationally and had 3 of our own.
What were some of the difficulties in that you said about having to go offshore in the end? Was fabric quite expensive back in that time as well?
We initially used Australian-made fabric, but again, those factories closed, so we had to import fabric while we were still producing onshore. And we would import, up to kilometres of fabric. One particular challenge one year was we had suede moleskin coming from, I think it was Czechoslovakia, and it missed the boat. So had had it not arrived, we would have lost our whole market basically for that following winter. With some negotiation and some help from the people who made the fabric, they managed to get it on a boat, and it got here before its due date. So that was something that ended well, but could have been really scary.
Did you feature wool in a lot of your garments as well?
We had wool in we had knits in wool. That was when we were making offshore. We used to use an Italian merino yarn, and then they were knitted up in Hong Kong, and then later the Chinese were actually making some really good wool non-pill yarn, and we used that, and they were fabulous. The quality was really, really good.
To give us an idea of scale or how many garments a year you used to produce, do you have any idea? You said except for that you went to 100 odd stores and wholesaling?
Thousands. It was thousands. So we'd get a shipment come in ready for packing and sending off to the stores, and we had a great big warehouse behind our shop in Borough, and there were just boxes everywhere. And yesterday it was going, where do we start? So yeah, it was a case of sorting, selecting, counting, packing.
Obviously provided a good source of employment in the local mid-north area as well, I'd imagine.
We had fabulous staff, and they were all really, really loyal. And we also had young people, because we were a 7-day-a-week business. So we'd always employ students from the local school who were just, it was lovely watching them grow and take on that responsibility, because we were at the end of the phone, but they took on that responsibility really, really well and grew.
How did you go from producing or sewing outfits for young children to then venturing into the women's, and were you men's as well?
Yeah, we did women's and men's.
But that's a big difference in simple outfits for small children to high-end fashion.
Yeah, it wasn't really high-end fashion, so it was more weekend casuals, and we sort of went from just the children's wear to sort of a family look, so the whole family could shop there, and then sort of let go of the men's a bit. And then before we closed, we were predominantly women's wear in the end, because we were fighting against, well, not fighting, but the competition for really cheap imports of children's casual clothing. So we decided that market was just a bit too hard.
How did you go about marketing your wares?
We did direct marketing, so catalogues, and also some advertising. We used to advertise in Country Style magazine, and then we'd always get out and about to field days and catch up with customers, and that was really fun, catching up with the people that actually wore and bought the clothes. Even now we closed the business in 2012, but even now people come up to me and say, I've still got a Saltbush this or that, which is really nice.
I must admit, I was, before I interviewed you, I had a look through my wardrobe to see if I still had anything, but no, it was a little bit too far back for me to hold on to stuff. Do you still have some pieces that you love and wear?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
What were some of your favourite pieces that you designed?
Look, it's a bit hard. So there were the classic trousers, and we'd always get the comments back from people at how well they fitted. And then certainly our woolen jumpers. Again, they were simple designs, but it was really good yarn. And some favourites out of probably each of the designs. And every year there was probably a favourite piece.
What led to the end of Saltbush Clothing?
I think it was after the GFC, and during the drought. Most of the stores who bought from us were regional, so their customers weren't spending money, they weren't spending money. So it was quite a lot of factors that kind of led to that. Our children had finished high school, and I think it was time to just slow down. So we thought the best thing to do was close.
So rather than sell it?
Yeah, I think it was difficult to sell at that time too.
So what happened after that, after 2012 when Saltbush wrapped up? So
after 2012 we'd moved to the Riverland in 2010 and really enjoyed it. Everyone was just so welcoming. And the weather's great. It's a bit warmer than Borough. Not that I don't love Borough still, but it is a bit warmer than Borough. And we've got a few hundred acres. So we had a bit of a play with some horticulture and some irrigation. So we grew pumpkins and garlic and that was fun and really hard.
A bit different to wool growing.
It's very different to wool growing. We had boar goats and we've got Dorper sheep, which again are very different to merinos, but absolute characters. And I worked off farm in a few different roles. Yeah, so I was with a wine helping marketing with a wine company here for a while, and then started with Flinders University in 2017 in just a support role, and then that has since changed. I'm now in community engagement and communications, and it kind of brings lots of passion or lots of things that are really important to me closer to home, because I worked in health and in rural health, and I know how challenging it is for us all living in the bush, having sort of equitable access to health professionals, and Flinders Rural and Remote Health are doing their bit to try and grow the rural health workforce as well.
What are some of the latest initiatives there?
Probably the latest is the South Australia Rural Medical Program. So it's the 4-year Doctor of Medicine that students will be able to study. It's a postgraduate degree, but it's an end-to-end program that they will do entirely rurally. And that's really exciting. That starts next year in 2025. And then they will also be able to go on and do their postgraduate years rurally. So that's a really exciting initiative.
And aside from your office job, you still have a bit of the clothing line, but you've still got a bit of a side hustle or side income as well with your Airbnb.
Yeah, we do. We've got a bed and breakfast on the river. That's an original settlers cottage that's just gorgeous and popular. It's quiet. It's on a lovely stretch. It's a lovely old stone cottage, and just on the river's edge itself. It's private. It's quiet and relaxing for them. So if they need us, yeah, we're there. But if they don't need us, they just come move in.
Were you affected by the flood?
Yeah, we were. Certainly the cottage was about, the water came in, so over a metre. So that was stripped, sandbagged and closed for 8 months. We live just above a floodplain. And so that whole floodplain where our irrigation is, that was about, in the old money, 9 feet underwater. It wasn't fun. We knew it was coming, so we were able to plan for it. So unlike some people further upstream who the flood arrived on them so quickly, we at least did have the time to plan. And then also the opportunity, I suppose, after the flood to do the cottage up how we wanted it. So it's still lovely and rustic on the outside, but it's modern and fresh on the inside with mod cons.
All right, well, I've got a few quick questions at the end here that I've started to ask people just to wrap up the interview. One of them is, where is your favourite place in the Riverland and why?
One would have to be Banrock, being able to sit up there and look over the wetlands and then also walk down and into the wetlands. It's just stunning. And seeing the work that they've done protecting the area, and also the trees that have come back to life by bringing in that normal flooding and drying of that area, and the regeneration that's happened is extraordinary. Another place, actually, we camped and have camped there a few times up on, I think it's Charla Creek, and that's just stunning up there. It's just beautiful. So, but then, of course, you've got, there's great places to eat, and there's, some nice wineries to visit too in the Riverland. I hear so many people poo-poo Riverland wineries, but some of them are great, and some of the wines they're producing, like some of those Mediterranean varieties, are just fabulous.
What's the best piece of advice that someone has given you?
Believe in yourself and go for it. What
are people generally surprised to find out about you?
Actually, Burra actually hosted all the crew and actors for Breaker Morant back in the late 70s, or 79, I think. And like all the family had a bit part in it, as they had, all the extras. And that was really exciting. And I actually played opposite Bryan Brown, who was Lieutenant Hancock in the film, as his wife. So that's a bit of a...
So an acting career in there as well?
No, I think after that I decided I'd never want to be an actor.
What was that like? What was Bryan Brown like?
He was lovely. Look, they were all really delightful. And I was actually the trained nurse on set for a while as well, because there was lots of action. There was lots of horse riding and potential for really nasty accidents. Thank goodness there weren't any. But they were all, it was a very exciting time for the town, and they were all really lovely people. Yeah.
Well, there you go. And then there's that connection with Renmark as well. There used to be the...
Absolutely,
the bar.
The Breaker.
Yeah. Well, there you go. What's one skill you've always wanted to learn? Perhaps acting?
No. I think painting, as in painting paintings. I've dabbled and had lessons, and I'd love to have the time to be able to sit down and really get into that. Perhaps one day in the future.
Excellent. Well, Elspeth, thank you very much for having a chat to me on Riverland Women.
Thanks, Kerry.
That was Elspeth Radford from Wigley Flat. And I do apologise about the audio in this episode. Technology let me down big time, which does happen sometimes, unfortunately. Thank you for listening to this episode of Riverland Women.